Welcome in, everyone. I am genuinely thrilled to have you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
And when I say you, I mean I am talking directly to you.
The person on the other side of this audio.
Right, exactly. Maybe you're commuting or, maybe walking the dog or just taking a moment for yourself.
Which we all need.
Definitely. And we know the profile of the listener who tunes into this deep dive. You are an eager learner.
Absolutely.
You're the kind of person who is constantly absorbing new information, devouring books, analyzing articles, trying to find that edge to level up your life or your career
Right.
or your finances.
Right, you're looking for that advantage.
But, and I know this because, well, if you are anything like I have been at various points in my life, you eventually hit this wall.
A very frustrating wall.
An invisible, incredibly frustrating wall. You build up this massive reservoir of knowledge, right? All these brilliant philosophies bouncing around in your head.
But there's a gap.
A massive gap between, consuming that information and actually putting it into practice in the real world.
You know the theory.
Yeah, you know the theory, but the execution is lagging. And bridging that exact gap is the entire mission of our deep dive today.
It really is the eternal struggle, isn't it? I mean, of the modern knowledge worker.
100%.
We live in this era of information abundance, but execution poverty.
Execution poverty. That is a great way to put it.
Thanks. And the friction between theoretical understanding and practical application is exactly what we are going to dissect today. We're unpacking a very specific, highly concentrated section of our source material.
Let's get into it.
So it's Chapter 9, from a document simply titled 10 Still Want More. Here are some to-dos.pdf.
Catchy title.
Very literal, right? But what makes this text so compelling is that it's built entirely around a pivot.
A pivot from what to what?
Well, the author explicitly acknowledges that up to this point in their broader work, they've shared what many readers might interpret as high-level philosophy.
Right.
Mindset shifts, ways to view money, ways to view risk.
The thinking part.
Exactly. But they firmly define themselves as someone who both thinks and does. They love new ideas, absolutely, but they love action equally.
Yeah.
So this chapter is their concrete, unvarnished answer to the readers who are tired of just thinking. The ones who want a highly specific, boots-on-the-ground to-do list.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it is so easy to get caught up in that thinking phase forever.
It feels productive.
It totally feels productive. Reading a book feels like you're doing work, but I mean, it's really just preparation.
Just warming up.
Right. So as we go through this material, we are going to extract those actionable steps. But let me just hook you real quick, because the way this author takes action in the real world is wild.
It's very unconventional.
Wonderfully unconventional. By the end of this deep dive, you are going to understand exactly what buying toilet paper on sale, an incredibly desperate offer of 10 literal pigs,
Yes, actual pigs.
and having a business partner who happens to be a cat all have in common.
It sounds absurd right now.
It does. But more importantly, you will see how these seemingly bizarre concepts are actually masterclasses in taking action and removing the emotional friction from success.
They are brilliant metaphors, but, as we will see, they're also literal tactics the author has deployed in the market.
Real tactics.
Real-world stuff. The overarching theme we will continually return to is that critical difference between passive learning and active execution.
So holding a mirror up.
Exactly. This deep dive is designed to help you hold a mirror up to your own strategies. Are you just collecting data, or are you executing? Because the first step the author prescribes to move from theory to practice is actually incredibly counterintuitive.
Right. You would think step one on an action-oriented to-do list would be to, go out and hustle harder.
You get 10 phone calls.
Start the LLC, grind it out. But step one is to simply stop.
Just stop.
Just stop. Take a complete break from whatever it is you're currently doing.
It is a vital diagnostic moment. The text advises taking a hard pause to assess what is actually working in your life and what is failing.
Which is hard to do.
It's very hard. The author leans on that classic, almost cliché definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
We've all heard it.
We have. It seems obvious, but human beings are incredibly resistant to stopping.
Why is that?
We fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy. We get caught in the momentum of our own routines.
Even bad routines.
Especially bad routines. Even when those routines are leading us toward financial or professional mediocrity, we just keep going. The author's directive is uncompromising here. Stop doing what is not working and actively look for something new.
Because you can't fill a cup that's already full.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot fill a cup that is already full of bad habits.
But how do they actually go about looking for something new? Because they don't just sit in a dark room meditating on it, hoping for an epiphany.
No, they take physical action.
Right. The text says the author actively searches for new ideas by physically going to bookstores.
Which feels almost vintage now. But the principle holds.
True. But they aren't just wandering aimlessly through the aisles. They are specifically hunting for what they call formulas.
Formulas, yes.
What exactly does the author mean by a formula in this context?
So the author views wealth generation, investing, and business not as some innate magical talent.
Not a genetic gift.
Right. It's not something you either have or you don't. They view it as a series of learnable recipes.
Recipes. I like that.
A formula is essentially a how-to book on a unique, highly specific subject that the author currently knows absolutely nothing about.
Nothing at all.
Total beginner. It democratizes the entire concept of success. If it is just a formula, well, anyone can learn it. You don't need a genius IQ. You just need the recipe and the willingness to follow the instruction.
Okay, so they go to the bookstore, they look for a recipe they've never tried before, and the text provides a very specific anecdote about this.
It does.
The author is in a bookstore and stumbles upon a book called The 16% Solution by Joel Moskowitz.
Yes, and for context, this book is about investing in tax lien certificates.
Which sounds incredibly dry and complicated.
It does.
Yeah.
But the author buys the book, reads it, and here is the crucial pivot point in the text. The very next Thursday, the author did exactly what the book said to do.
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
That timeline just stops me in my tracks.
It's fast.
It's lightning fast. Think about it. How often do you, the person listening right now, buy a book, get incredibly inspired, highlight 50 pages, and then put it on a shelf and literally never look at it again?
I have a stack of those on my nightstand right now.
We all do. Or you tell yourself you'll implement the ideas when things quiet down at work.
Which they never do.
Never. But this author reads it and acts on it in a matter of days. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Please do.
Because if you are listening to this, you are probably a highly analytical person.
Yeah.
And the idea of just grabbing a random book about a complex financial instrument you know nothing about and blindly executing it by next Thursday, that sounds borderline reckless.
It sounds like gambling.
Exactly. Is the author advocating for financial gambling?
That is a very fair skepticism.
Yeah.
And it's a critical distinction to make. The author is not advocating for betting your life savings in 4 days on a whim.
Okay, good.
The next Thursday rule is not about blind faith. It is a deliberate psychological mechanism to break analysis paralysis.
To force the issue.
Exactly. The point is to prove to your own brain that the friction of starting is an illusion. You execute the first step of the formula.
Step one.
Just step one. You dip your toe in the water before your brain has time to manufacture 100 reasons why it won't work. The speed of implementation is the actual secret weapon here.
Not the specific book itself.
Right. The specific book is almost irrelevant compared to the habit. It's about building the muscle of immediate action.
That makes a lot more sense. It's about momentum. But of course, the moment you decide to take immediate action and try something new, who immediately shows up in your life?
Oh, the naysayer.
The naysayer, almost without fail.
It is uncanny how quickly they appear.
In the source material, the social dynamic that immediately follows the author's decision to act is fascinating. A neighbor chimes in and tries to talk the author out of it.
Because, of course they do.
Right. The neighbor provides a laundry list of reasons why this 16% tax lien strategy simply will not work.
Why it's a scam.
Why it's too risky,
Yeah.
all of it. And how does the author handle this neighbor? Do they debate them?
No,
Do they show them the math in the book?
definitely not.
No, they completely ignore the neighbor. And the reasoning is what makes this such a powerful mental model. The author ignores the neighbor because the neighbor had never actually done it.
They had never invested in tax lien.
Never.
This is one of the most crucial mental models for our listener to adopt from this deep dive. We are constantly surrounded by armchair experts. Think about your own life. People are more than happy to offer critiques, dire warnings, and pessimistic forecasts about endeavors they have absolutely zero personal experience with.
They love to give advice on things they've never tried.
Exactly. And the author's filter for advice is ruthlessly efficient.
What's the filter?
It's simply this: I will not take advice on how to do something from someone who's never done it.
That is so clean.
It fundamentally neutralizes the naysayer.
It really does. It makes you wonder how many great ideas, how many formulas you might have abandoned in your own career or personal life because a coworker or a family member who had no experience in that specific field told you it wouldn't work.
We let other people's unverified fears dictate our actions.
Yes. We outsource our risk assessment to people who aren't even playing the game. But the author is completely immune to this. They view the formula from the bookstore as a proven recipe and the neighbor's fear-based opinion as irrelevant noise.
If we expand on this concept of the bookstore formula search, it is something you can apply immediately, regardless of your industry.
It doesn't have to be real estate.
Not at all. It does not have to be tax lands. It could be a new programming language, a new management philosophy,
Right.
or a different marketing channel entirely.
Anything new.
The discipline lies in the deliberate exposure to the unknown. You go to the section of the bookstore or the corner of the internet that you usually ignore, you find the how-to guide, you read the recipe, and you commit to executing step 1 by next Thursday.
And when the inevitable armchair expert tells you it won't work.
You apply the filter. Have they done it? If not, their input is dismissed.
So we have the mindset. Stop what isn't working, find a new formula, ignore the inexperienced critics, and act fast.
That's the foundation.
And that speed of implementation leads us perfectly into the next major concept the text covers. The author has this book, the 16% solution they want to execute. But reading a book doesn't make you an expert overnight.
Not even close.
So how does the author bridge the gap between reading the formula and actually executing it safely?
This brings us to the author's approach to gathering knowledge, and really the true cost of education.
Okay.
Their advice is incredibly pragmatic. Find someone who has already achieved what you want to do and take them to lunch.
Taking someone to lunch, it sounds so basic.
It does.
But the way the author executes this is like a targeted strike for knowledge. For these 16% tax lien certificates, the author doesn't just wander around a networking event hoping to bump into an investor.
No, they're much more direct.
They physically go down to the county tax office. They find the specific government employee who actually processes these files every single day.
The person doing the actual work.
Right. And they discover that this specific employee also invests in the tax liens personally. And right then and there, the author invites her to lunch.
It is networking stripped of all the superficiality. It is purely functional.
But let me pause you there, because I know what the listener is thinking.
What's that?
If I walk into a government building right now and ask the clerk behind the glass to go to lunch with me so I can pick their brain, they're going to look at me like I have two heads.
That is the fear, yes.
Why on earth would this government employee, who is probably busy and overworked, agree to spend their lunch hour teaching a random guy from the bookstore how to invest?
Is a great question. And it speaks to a deep psychological truth about human nature that the author clearly understands.
Which is?
People inherently want to be recognized as experts.
Oh.
They want to share their knowledge, especially if it is a niche topic that most people ignore or misunderstand.
Like tax liens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most people probably complain to this clerk all day.
Right, they're paying taxes.
Yes. So the text explicitly notes that this employee was thrilled to tell the author everything she knew. After lunch, she spent the entire afternoon showing the author the ropes.
Just because he asked?
By offering a free lunch and genuine, respectful curiosity, the author completely bypassed the bureaucratic red tape and the social friction that usually prevents people from accessing insider knowledge.
You are not asking them for a favor.
No, you are offering them a platform to showcase their expertise.
That completely shifts the perspective. You aren't being annoying, you're being an appreciative audience.
Everyone loves an appreciative audience.
And let's look at the timeline the text gives us for this entire sequence because it is staggering.
Let's hear it.
1 day to read the book.
Okay.
1 day to take action, which meant physically going to the county office.
Day 2.
1 hour for lunch with the expert. And 1 day to acquire 2 great deals.
4 days.
4 days. In 4 days, they went from complete ignorance in a bookstore to acquiring 2 properties with the help of this employee. And the text notes those properties have been accruing interest at 16% ever since.
That 4-day timeline is the ultimate indictment of passive waiting.
It really is.
Think about how many people believe they need to go back to school for 4 years to change their financial trajectory.
Or read 20 more books.
It shatters the illusion that you need endless months of study before you can make a move. The friction most people feel when approaching strangers is massive.
Terrifying for some.
But the author's mindset reframes this entirely. They lead with curiosity. And the return on investment for the price of one lunch and one afternoon of humility is lifelong passive income.
Which brings us to a fascinating discussion about how the author views education and risk as a whole.
Yes.
The text mentions that the author credits their wealth and their complete freedom from needing a regular 9-to-5 job directly to taking classes, reading, and attending seminars.
They are a lifelong student.
Actively searching newspapers and the internet for interesting classes. Some are free, some are inexpensive, but some are very expensive seminars on exactly what they want to learn, and they pay for them willingly.
They pay willingly because they possess a fundamental understanding of the difference between price and value.
Price versus value.
Yes. And the text brilliantly illustrates this distinction with what we can call the condo story.
Oh, I have been waiting to get to the condo story.
It is a profound lesson in redefining what the word expensive truly means in the real world.
Okay, so the author has a neighbor. We don't know if it's the same pessimistic neighbor from earlier, but for the sake of the story, let's imagine it is.
Let's assume it is.
This neighbor buys a condominium for $100,000. His entire investment strategy is to buy it, sit there, and wait for the market price to go up.
Standard strategy.
Right. Meanwhile, the author buys the exact identical condo right next door, same floor plan, same building, but the author only pays $50,000 for it.
Exactly half price.
Exactly half. How did they do that?
Yeah.
Because they bought it at a foreclosure auction.
Now, navigating a foreclosure auction is not intuitive.
No, it sounds scary.
It can be a complex, legally intimidating process fraught with hidden risks. So how did the author know how to do it smoothly?
They took a class.
The text explains that they paid $500 for a specialized class that taught them the exact formula for buying foreclosures.
A $500 class. But here is the absolute punchline of the anecdote. The neighbor who paid $100,000 for his condo told the author that a $500 real estate investment class was too expensive.
Too expensive.
He claimed he couldn't afford the $500, and he couldn't afford the time to sit in the class.
This reveals a massive, almost tragic blind spot in human psychology regarding risk and capital allocation.
It's unbelievable.
The neighbor genuinely believed he was being fiscally responsible by saving his $500.
He thought he was being smart.
He protected his cash in the short term. But in doing so, his ignorance cost him $50,000 in overpayment on the actual asset.
Ouch.
He effectively lost $50,000 to save $500. He stepped over dollars to pick up pennies.
It makes you want to reach through the pages and shake the neighbor.
It does.
But we all do this, don't we? I know I have.
We all have.
If you are listening, think about your own life right now. Are you refusing to buy a $20 book or a $200 online course, or refusing to spend an hour taking an expert to coffee because it feels like an unnecessary expense?
It feels like spending money you don't need to.
Meanwhile, the lack of that specific, targeted knowledge is costing you thousands of dollars in lost opportunities, or it's keeping you stuck in a job you desperately want to leave.
Exactly.
The author's friends told him he was wasting his money on those seminars, and yet, as the text points out, those same friends are still stuck at the exact same jobs while the author is wealthy and financially free.
It demands that the listener completely redefine the word expensive.
How so?
Expensive is not the upfront cost of targeted education. Expensive is the long-term compounding cost of ignorance.
The cost of ignorance. Wow.
The neighbor took the traditional route, shopped with a standard broker, paid retail price, and thought he was playing it safe. The author bypassed the traditional route, bought the specialized knowledge, and captured $50,000 of immediate equity.
Okay, so let's recap where we are on this to-do list.
Good idea.
We have stopped what isn't working. We are actively looking for new formulas. We are breaking analysis paralysis by executing by Thursday. We are taking the actual experts to lunch, and we are paying for specialized knowledge because ignorance is too expensive.
That's a solid list so far.
Now we cross the threshold into the actual execution and negotiation phase. And here is where the text gets incredibly interesting, because the author's strategy for making deals is completely devoid of the emotional baggage that paralyzes the rest of us.
Yes, the emotional detachment is key.
The mandate in the text is brutally simple. Make lots of offers.
It sounds simple on paper, but making offers is psychologically arduous for most people.
Why?
It triggers a deep fear of rejection.
True.
But notice how the author frames their effort level. They state clearly, I do as little work as possible.
Which sounds lazy, but it's not.
It's efficient. When they want a piece of real estate, They look at many properties and they write offers. But they rely on the real estate agent to actually do the heavy lifting of presenting those offers to the sellers.
Which brings us to the apartment anecdote. The author has a friend who wants to learn how to buy apartment houses.
Right.
So, on a Saturday, the author, the friend, and the friend's real estate agent go out and look at 6 different apartment buildings.
6 buildings.
The author assesses them. 4 of them were dogs, meaning bad properties with hidden issues, but 2 were genuinely good investments.
Okay.
So what is the author's actionable advice to the friend? Write offers on all 6.
All of them. Even the bad ones.
All of them. And offer exactly half of what the owners are asking.
Half. 50%. You can practically feel the visceral reaction in the room when that advice was given.
The tension.
The text notes that the friend of the agent nearly had heart attacks. They thought making an offer that low was incredibly rude, highly offensive, and a waste of everyone's time.
And I have to push back here on behalf of the listener.
Go for it.
Because in a normal housing market, if you go out and offer 50% of the asking price, the seller's agent is going to laugh you out of the room.
They probably will.
Worse, they might blacklist you. They won't take your future calls. Doesn't this strategy risk destroying your reputation and relationships in the market? Isn't the friend kind of right to be terrified of being seen as rude?
It is a totally valid concern if you are operating under the standard societal rules of politeness.
Okay.
But the author is operating in a completely different paradigm. To understand why the author does this, we have to understand their view of seller psychology and market equilibrium.
How do they view it?
The author argues that you, as a buyer, actually have no idea what the right price is.
Really?
And crucially, neither does the seller.
Wait, the seller doesn't know what their own property is worth.
Sellers almost always ask for too much based on emotion or bad advice. You cannot discover the true rock-bottom market value of an asset until a second party, the buyer, actually engages in a negotiation.
But the fear of offending them.
The fear of being rude is societal conditioning. We are trained from childhood to be polite, to not cause a fuss, to not offend strangers.
Especially when money is involved.
Exactly. Offering half feels like a violation of that social contract. But the author views business not as a tea party, but as a mechanism for finding equilibrium.
A mechanism for finding equilibrium.
Right. What was the result for the friend who was too afraid to be rude?
What happened to him?
The text suspects the agent just didn't want to work that hard to write 6 lowball offers, so they did nothing.
Nothing at all.
They walked away to keep looking for a better deal. No offers were made. And the tragic punchline is that this person is still out there, endlessly looking for the right deal at the right price while taking 0 action.
They protected their ego, they remained polite, and they achieved nothing.
Exactly nothing.
And to illustrate just how completely devoid of emotion this process should be, the author shares what is without a doubt my favorite anecdote in the entire text.
The 10 pigs.
The story of the 10 pigs.
It is a masterclass in the gamification of rejection.
Okay, so the author talks about a time when they had a piece of real estate they wanted to sell. It had been sitting on the market for months with absolutely 0 traction.
Crickets.
No calls, no viewings. They deeply understand what it feels like to be a seller in a dead, lifeless market.
It's a terrible feeling.
They were so desperate for any sign of life, any pulse of interest, that they explicitly state if someone had come along and offered them 10 pigs for the property, they would have been happy.
Now, let's be very clear here. They would not have been happy to accept the 10 pigs.
Right. They weren't going to trade a house for livestock.
No.
They would have been happy simply because someone, anyone, was interested enough to engage.
To start the game.
Yes. Because an offer, even an absurd, borderline insulting offer of farm animals, creates a counter-offer opportunity.
The author says they would have countered the offer, maybe asking for a pig farm in exchange.
Just to keep the ball rolling.
No. They view buying and selling as just a fun game. They literally write in the text, it's fun and only a game. Make offers. Someone might say yes.
If we distill this down to the underlying mental model, the 10 pigs is about the complete detachment of ego from negotiation.
Completely stripping it away.
By viewing the transaction as a game, you strip away the fear of insult and the fear of failure.
The friend who wouldn't offer half price was protecting their ego.
Right.
The author, having been on the bleeding edge as a desperate seller, knows that an offer is merely the opening move on a chessboard. It is not an insult. It is data.
Data. just seeing where they stand.
It is a starting point to see how motivated the other side truly is.
It totally shifts your perspective. If you are listening to this right now and you are terrified to negotiate your salary or pitch a new client or make an offer on a house because you don't want to offend them, just remember the 10 pigs.
They might be waiting for the pigs.
The other person might just be incredibly relieved that someone is finally engaging with them. They might be sitting there waiting for the game to start.
It's very possible.
But I have to ask the logical follow-up question.
Let's hear it.
Taking massive action and making lots of wild, lowball offers does carry a massive inherent risk, doesn't it?
In what sense?
What if you offer half on an apartment building and the seller miraculously says, yes, absolutely, let's do it, but you suddenly realize you don't actually want the property, or your math was wrong and it's a terrible deal? Are you trapped?
That is the exact fear that paralyzes the friend in the apartment story.
Right.
But the author has a built-in safety net for that exact scenario, which removes the final barrier of fear. They never make an offer without an escape clause.
And this is where the cat comes in.
Yes, the business partner.
I could not stop laughing when I read this part. The author makes an offer with language detailing subject to contingencies.
Standard legal practice.
Now, subject to is standard in real estate. Subject to a home inspection. Subject to securing a mortgage. But the author uses a very specific phrase. Subject to the approval of a business partner.
Which sounds very legitimate.
When the seller reads that, it sounds incredibly professional. They think, okay, this investor has to run this by his board of directors or his financial backer.
But the text reveals the twist.
The twist. The author never specifies who the business partner is. Most people don't know that his business partner is his cat.
It is brilliant precisely because of its absurdity.
If the seller accepts the 50% lowball offer and the author suddenly gets cold feet, realizes it's a bad deal, or just changes his mind, he doesn't have to stress.
No stress at all.
He just goes home, has a conversation with his cat, and then calls the seller or the agent to cancel the deal because his partner didn't approve.
Before we move on, let's clarify the mechanics of this because it is the linchpin of taking fearless action.
Yeah, let's break it down.
A subject to contingency is basically a legal ripcord.
A ripcord.
It allows you to lock in the price and control the asset while giving you a defined period to back out without financial penalty if certain conditions aren't met.
So you have all the control.
Exactly. The author explicitly states they make this ridiculous statement about the cat to illustrate how absurdly easy and simple the game actually is.
People make it too hard.
People make business, investing, and life choices far too difficult. They take themselves too seriously. The escape clause, whether it is an actual formal inspection period, a spouse you need to consult, or a literal feline, empowers you to take massive, immediate action because it creates a low-risk exit strategy.
So you can make an offer on 6 apartments today because you know you have a ripcord you can pull tomorrow morning.
Precisely.
It is so liberating. It takes all the weight off your shoulders. You aren't committing your life savings. You are just starting a conversation with a safety net.
And the text broadens this out beautifully beyond just real estate.
With the dating analogy.
Yes. Finding a good deal, finding the right business to start, finding the right people or investors, it is exactly like dating.
You have to put yourself out there.
You have to go out into the market. You have to talk to a lot of people, make a lot of offers, face rejection, negotiate, and accept.
The author mentions knowing single people who just sit at home waiting for the phone to ring.
But that doesn't work.
It never works. You have to go to the market, even if it's just the supermarket. The processes of search, offer, reject, negotiate, and accept are fundamental, unavoidable parts of almost everything in life.
That analogy translates perfectly to professional networking or job hunting for our listener.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are sitting at home right now, tweaking the font on your resume for the 50th time,
Waiting for recruiters to magically discover your LinkedIn profile.
you are the single person waiting for the phone to ring. You're the friend waiting for the perfect apartment deal to magically appear at the right price without making an offer.
You have to get into the market.
Make the lowball offers, face the rejection, and use your escape clauses when necessary. You have to initiate the game.
So having an escape clause like the cat gives you the courage to make offers. And knowing about the 10 pigs strips away your ego. But you can't make offers if you don't know what to buy in the first place.
Right, sourcing the deals.
That brings us to how the author actually sources these deals. And ironically, in our hyper-digital age of Zillow, complex algorithms, and automated alerts, the author's method requires putting on a pair of running shoes.
Very analog.
Section 4 of the text outlines a strategy I call boots on the ground, or micro-observation. The author recommends jogging, walking, or driving a specific area once a month for just 10 minutes.
10 minutes a month. It is a remarkably low barrier to entry.
Very low.
But the power lies in the repetition and the physical presence. If we connect this to the broader philosophy of the text, the author introduces a vital equation for success here.
What's the equation?
They state that for there to be a profit in any deal, there must be two distinct elements: a bargain and change.
Bargain plus change.
Bargains, they note, are everywhere. Anyone can find something cheap.
Yeah.
But it is change that turns a stagnant bargain into a profitable opportunity.
Bargain plus change equals profit. That is a massive insight. A cheap house in a dying town is just a cheap house.
Exactly.
But how do you spot that vital catalyst of change before anyone else does?
By being physically present in the environment repeatedly.
When the author jogs a neighborhood they want to invest in, the monthly repetition allows their brain to notice slight incremental differences.
They aren't staring at a spreadsheet.
They are looking at the actual streets. For example, they look for real estate signs that have been up for a long time.
A leading indicator.
Why? Because an old, faded sign means the seller is probably exhausted paying 2 mortgages and might be incredibly agreeable to a deal, maybe even that 50% lowball offer we talked about.
It is the analog extraction of data. We rely so heavily on digital dashboards today that we forget the physical world leaves breadcrumbs.
The physical world tells a story.
The author watches for moving trucks going in or out of a neighborhood, and they take the time to actually stop their jog and talk to the drivers.
And they talk to the postal carriers, the mailman.
I love that detail.
I found this detail so charming, but so brilliantly strategic. Because, as the text points out, postal carriers know absolutely everything about an area.
They're the ultimate insiders.
They know who is moving out, who is struggling to pay bills, which houses have been vacant for months. It is grassroots, human-to-human intelligence gathering.
It is also a form of contrarian action.
How so?
The author describes a strategy of finding a bad area, specifically an area that the news media has sensationalized and scared everyone else away from.
Where people are fleeing.
The general public, driven by headlines, is running away. But the author will drive that specific bad neighborhood once a month for a year, patiently waiting for signs of something changing for the better.
Whole year.
They will talk to new retailers moving into the area to find out why corporate headquarters chose that specific spot. They are looking for the leading indicators of change.
And it only takes a few minutes.
And it takes only a few minutes a month, stacking this observation habit on top of things they're already doing, like exercising or going to the grocery store.
The patience required for that is incredible. And I want to contrast that for a second to show the listener the full spectrum of action.
That's a good point.
Earlier, we talked about the 16% tax lens. In that scenario, the timeline was lightning fast. Read a book on Tuesday, go to the office on Wednesday, have lunch, buy a property on Friday. 4 days.
Fast action.
Fast action. But here, the author is talking about driving a bad neighborhood once a month for an entire year before making a single move.
Right.
It proves that taking action doesn't always mean being impulsive or frantic. Sometimes taking action means implementing a system of patient, relentless, analog observation.
Precisely. The master skill is balancing extreme patience and observation with lightning-fast execution when the variables finally align.
When the time is right, you strike.
For the listener, ask yourself, what is your version of the 10-minute jog? If you aren't in real estate, how are you observing your industry?
Are you looking at the streets, so to speak?
Are you watching the slow, incremental shifts in your company's market that your competitors are missing because they are only looking at quarterly digital reports?
Who are the mail carriers in your industry?
Exactly. Are you taking the time to talk to the postal carriers of your industry, the frontline workers, the customer service reps, the delivery drivers who know what is actually happening on the ground long before the executives realize it?
That is a phenomenal way to apply it. You have to find out where the moving trucks are going in your own career.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we move into the next section of the text, having established how to find deals and make offers, the author shifts gears slightly to talk about broader macroeconomic psychology.
Taking a wider view.
They explore how different classes of people react to pricing.
Yeah.
And they use an analogy that is so painfully accurate, it hurts.
The toilet paper analogy.
It's the toilet paper analogy.
This might be the most brilliant distillation of the consumer mindset versus the investor mindset I have ever seen.
It really is. The author states bluntly, consumers will always be poor.
A strong statement.
Very strong. Now, why would they say something so definitive? Because of how consumers fundamentally react to prices. Think about it. When the local supermarket puts toilet paper on sale, what does the consumer do?
They stock up.
They run into the store and stock up. They buy a year's worth of toilet paper, stuffing it into their garage, because it's a bargain.
They understand buying low.
They understand the concept perfectly, but when the housing market or the stock market goes on sale, which the news media usually frames as a terrifying crash, a recession, or a correction, what does that exact same consumer do?
They run away.
They run away in absolute terror.
The behavioral economics at play here are endlessly fascinating. Let's really break down why this happens.
Please do.
When it comes to consumer goods, the individual feels they understand the intrinsic value. They know what a roll of toilet paper is worth to them.
It's a tangible thing.
So when the price drops, logic dictates they buy. But when they see prices drop in financial markets, whether it's the 2008 housing crash or a massive sell-off in tech stocks, the media narrative induces panic.
The sky is falling.
Exactly. Because they don't understand the intrinsic value of the asset, they assume the dropping price means the asset has become permanently toxic. Fear completely overrides mathematical logic.
And the reverse is also true. The author points out that when the supermarket raises its prices on toilet paper, the consumer gets angry, they complain, and they shop somewhere else to find a better deal.
They refuse to overpay for paper.
Right. But when the housing or stock market raises its prices, when everything is expensive, bidding wars are happening, and the market is at an all-time high, that same consumer suddenly rushes in and starts buying.
Terrified of missing out on the boom.
Buying high and selling low. It is the exact opposite of the fundamental rule of wealth creation.
The text provides the golden rule here, which must be seared into the mind of anyone taking action.
What is the rule?
Profits are made in the buying, not in the selling.
Let me repeat that for the listener because it's so important. Profits are made in the buying, not in the selling.
It completely changes how you view a transaction.
It does. The neighbor from earlier who bought the $100,000 condo, he's hoping to make a profit in the selling, eventually, maybe, if the market goes up.
He is relying on hope.
Hope is not a strategy. The author, who bought the identical condo next door for $50,000 at the foreclosure auction, has already made a $50,000 profit the absolute second they sign the papers, purely because of the buying price.
Exactly. The profit is locked in at the moment of the transaction based on the price you negotiate.
In the buying.
And to illustrate just how creatively and aggressively you can optimize the buying phase, the author shares an incredible story about a land deal.
Oh, this story.
This story requires you to completely rethink how resources work.
Yeah.
They call this concept buy the pie and cut it in pieces.
This story blew my mind. But I will admit, the mechanics of it confused me at first. So let's break this down very carefully, because it feels like magic, but it's just smart leverage.
Let's walk through it.
The author has a friend who is looking for a certain piece of land. The friend has the money to buy, but they are busy. They don't have the time to go out and scout for the perfect spot.
Okay.
So the author takes action. They go out and find a large piece of land, a piece that is much, much larger than what the friend actually wants or needs.
A massive parcel.
The text says the author ties up this huge parcel of land with an option. Now, pause right there. What does that mean? How do you tie up land without just buying it outright?
This is where we need to explain the concept of an options contract, because this is the secret sauce of the entire deal.
Okay, explain options simply.
To explain it simply, an option is basically a legally binding contract where you pay the seller a small fee, sometimes very small, to reserve the right to buy that land at a set price for a specific amount of time.
Like a reservation fee.
Yes. Let's say a 90-day window. You do not own the land yet. You haven't taken out a massive mortgage. You just own the exclusive right to buy it. It requires very little cash up front, but it gives you total control over the asset for that 90-day window. No one else can buy it.
Okay, that makes sense. So the author controls this massive piece of land using an option. Then they call the friend and say, hey, I found this great spot. Do you want a piece of it?
Yes. And the friend looks at the specific slice of land they want, and they say yes.
So the author sells that specific piece to the friend.
Right. And here's the genius part. The author uses the money from the friend's purchase to fund the exercise of the option.
They use the friend's money to finalize the purchase of the entire original large parcel of land.
And what is the result?
The author gets to keep the remaining land for themselves, completely for free.
It is a breathtaking example of creative leverage. and finding value where others see obstacles.
It's thinking outside the box.
Most people, as the text points out, only look for what they can afford with the cash currently in their pocket.
Which keeps them small.
They operate from a mindset of strict limitation. They look too small. They go to the market looking to buy only a small slice of the pie, and as a result, they end up paying a premium retail price. They pay more for less.
The text actually says, small thinkers don't get the big breaks. If you want to get richer, think big.
The author solved the friend's problem.
The friend had no time to find land. And by thinking bigger than their own wallet, by controlling the whole pie instead of just a slice, they acquired an asset for free.
And what's wild is that they applied this think big mentality to everyday life, too, not just massive real estate deals.
Right. The text mentions how they buy office supplies.
Yes, computers.
When the author's company needed computers, they didn't just walk into a big box electronics store and buy them at retail price. They called up several friends and fellow business owners and asked, hey, are you guys in the market for computers too?
They pooled their collective demand.
Exactly. They walked into the dealers representing a massive volume order and negotiated a huge discount for everyone.
They manufactured institutional buying power out of thin air, simply by organizing their network.
Simply by asking around.
Retailers, wholesalers, and businesses love big spenders. They love volume because it guarantees cash flow. The author explicitly notes they do the exact same thing with stocks.
Grouping together?
They group together with other investors to execute large block trades to get volume discounts or better terms. The core macroeconomic message here is clear. Small people remain small because they think small, they act alone, or they let fear paralyze them into not acting at all.
Act alone. That is such a huge trap for the ambitious listener.
It's the myth of the lone wolf.
We think we have to do it all ourselves. We think we have to save up 100% of the money to buy the land. We think we have to pay retail for our software or our supplies. But by just making a few phone calls, by communicating with your network, you can multiply your purchasing power and your leverage exponentially.
The power of the network is massive.
So as we look at this entire to-do list, from reading formulas, to buying lunches, to making 50% offers, to tying up land with options, what does this all ultimately mean?
Where does it lead?
As we bring all these concepts together, the author leaves us with a look at history to validate everything we've discussed. They want us to learn from history, pointing out a very simple fact. All the big companies on the stock exchange started out as small companies.
Everyone starts at zero.
Everyone everywhere starts at zero.
It is a profoundly comforting truth. When you look at massive success, it's easy to assume they were born with an insurmountable advantage.
That they just had it handed to them.
But the author provides two starkly contrasting historical examples to prove that your current circumstances, and specifically your age, do not dictate your capacity to take action.
Who are the examples?
They point out that Colonel Sanders did not get rich until after he lost absolutely everything in his 60s.
Lost everything in his 60s. Imagine the resilience required to start over, to go out and make offers and face rejection at an age when society tells you to just retire and fade away.
Exactly. Age was not a barrier to action. And on the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, they mentioned Bill Gates, who was one of the richest men in the world before he was 30.
Completely different timelines.
The timelines are drastically different. The industry's fried chicken versus software are completely different, but the underlying mechanism of success is identical.
The underlying mechanism is execution.
Execution.
And that brings us to the ultimate final rule of the text, the thesis of Chapter 9. Action always beats inaction.
The most important words in the English language.
The author reiterates that these steps we've covered, the jogging, the bookstore, the cat, these are just a few of the things they have done and continue to do to recognize and capture opportunities. The most important words in the English language they emphasize are have done and do.
Have done and do.
You must take action before you can receive the financial rewards. You cannot harvest what you do not plant. Act now.
It is the perfect, definitive closing statement from the source material. It brings us full circle from the beginning of our deep dive today.
Back to the execution gap.
You can read the book, you can take the $500 class, you can listen to this very audio program for 60 minutes, but it is all just philosophy until you execute.
It really is. Until you do it, it's just entertainment. So let's do a rapid-fire recap of what you, the listener, need to go out and actually do based on this text.
To the real to-do list.
Go buy a book on a formula you know absolutely nothing about, read it, and execute step 1 by next Thursday just to prove you can.
Find the expert in the government office or the gatekeeper in your industry and buy them lunch.
Actively ignore the pessimistic neighbor or coworker who has never actually done the thing you were trying to do.
Make an offer for half the asking price, treat it like a game, and blame your cat if you need to pull the ripcord.
Look for moving trucks in your physical environment. Talk to your mail carrier or the frontline workers. Buy the whole pie instead of just a slice.
In whatever you do not run away from a market crash while running toward a sale on toilet paper.
Perfect.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought designed to linger long after you finish listening to us today.
Give it to them.
I want you to build on the profound analogies from our source material and apply them to your own life. Think about a major goal you have been putting off. Maybe it is a career pivot, a new investment, or finally launching a creative project.
Something you're hesitating on.
You have been waiting for the perfect circumstances, or the right price, or the exact right moment to guarantee success. Ask yourself, what is your version of the 10 pigs scenario?
That's a great question.
Are you holding out for a flawless, pristine transaction, when simply throwing out a ridiculous, low-stakes offer might be exactly what you need to break the ice and finally start the game? And more importantly, who or what is the cat you can use as your excuse, your safety net, to finally make a risk-free leap today?
I absolutely love that. Stop waiting for perfect. Go find your 10 pigs, go talk to your cat, and start playing the game. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Remember, action always beats inaction. We will catch you next time.